This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson, and with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And today we are going to be discussing what we call the inward and outward facing paths. And we're going to talk about what each of those means and maybe even some things that will help you decide which of those two paths you're currently committed to. But before talking about this, Brian, I think it's important to define what the hell we're talking about.
Sure, that's a good idea. I first heard the expression, the inward-facing path and the outward-facing path, from Rupert Spira. And I'll just briefly quote him, how he defines it. And then later on, I have some of my own short definitions to help solidify it. Rupert said, in the inward-facing path, we turn away from the objective content of experience. We just go back to ourselves. And then in the outward-facing path, we turn around, so to speak, and we face again the objects of experience, thoughts, feelings, sensations, in relation to our new understanding of ourselves as this open, empty presence of awareness. And sometimes he referred to it, the inward-facing path, as the Advaita or the Vedantic path, and sometimes you refer to the outward-facing path as the Tantric path. In other words, you're returning to life and living life with your new understanding that not only are you awareness, but everything else is also awareness, and therefore you.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways that people have used inward and outward. Like Tantra might be outward, where you're fully immersed in the senses of your experience, very much in the world, where they use things like sexual energy and beauty and nature very much as part of one's spiritual development. And the inward is more meditative, maybe separate from the world. Jeffrey Martin talks about the path of freedom, which is more the inward path, and the path of humanity, which is more the outward path. So these yin-yang combinations are reflected in many different traditions. And I find it interesting that spirituality is often bifurcated in those two different ways.
Yes, and it might be a little bit confusing when we are talking about non-duality, that we have now two ways of approaching it. And I think that one of the reasons that both are necessary, at least they were for me, is that our usual way of being in the world is looking outside at things in the world and seeing if we can gain something from them, either happiness or enlightenment. In other words, it's out there and we're separate from it. We're a body. And the inward-facing path is to try to see that everything that we can name, anything that we can conceive of, is known by something larger, and we're that. So in other words, we say, we're not the world, we're not the body, we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings. What are we? I would shorten that by saying nothing you can conceive of is awareness. And then, though, once you've done that, then that's not enough. I think you need to turn around again and look at the world and see that nothing you could name or conceive of is not awareness. In fact, there is nothing that can appear outside of awareness. And in this theory, we hold that all is awareness, that there's nothing but awareness, that everything is made of awareness. So you are universal awareness experiencing itself.
Well said there. I'm wondering, it comes to mind, is the inward path something that is best done first, and then out of that comes the outward path, or can they go in either direction? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've spoken to people who think that the outward-facing path can come first. In my experience, that hasn't been the case because of the power of the perception that what is outside of us is other than us. And and the perception that what we are is a separate body, mind, and personality. So I think the inward facing path, sometimes called neti, which is a Sanskrit term meaning not this, not this. When we say anything you can define as yourself is a concept known by something larger. And it's a way to look at that. So I think it's best for that to come first and then to turn around identifying with that pure awareness and then looking out at the world and seeing that it is all in awareness, made of awareness, and therefore it's all one.
Yeah, I've known people that have done the inward path, which then led to the outward path. And I've known people who have done the outward path that led to the inward path. So I think they can go in any order, but I think the most normal order is inward, then outward, as a natural progression. But I think every path has its pros and cons, its dangers and its advantages. And I'm wondering what you would say might be the dangers and advantages of each of those paths.
Well, I'm not so sure that either of those paths contain a danger in and of itself. I think the danger is when you stop halfway, when you look inside and you identify with pure awareness and you don't then look out at the world. When you stop with the knots, I call it you get a bad case of the knots. In other words, okay, I'm not the body, I am not this. And then you get into this thing where you say, well, I'm into non-duality, and that is not non-dual. This is not non-dual. The body and its experience is there something wrong with it? Enjoying life, enjoying the world, there's something wrong with it. And that to me is the biggest danger.
Yeah, it can separate you from the world and from other people
Right.
because you're too inward, you're too I am awareness only. And I think that is a danger that you sometimes see that can even lead to a certain dullness maybe or lack of dimensionality.
Yes, yes. And a loss of just the joy of everyday life. In other words, when you are stuck in that this is not non-dual, and there's the the contradiction in that phrase alone is mind-boggling to me.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, this is a very popular phrase in what I call the non-duality police. And the phrase physician, heal thyself. Well,
Mm-hmm.
non-duality police, arrest yourself.
You
You
heard
would
it here
think,
first, folks. So that's the danger. What are the advantages of the inward path of pursuing that perhaps first or where it can take you?
well, the advantage is that you are less caught up in what you need to do with the body and the mind. In other words, you have less of a sense that there is something that needs to be changed. Because if you are everything and everything appears in you, then there is a sense of unconditional allowing of everything, unconditional love. And when you do the inward facing path and you see that that universal awareness is yourself and it's already there, it's not something from outside that you get, then you start to identify with that universal love, and unconditional love then can send its perfume out into the individual experience.
You say that so poetically, and I'm always practically minded and less poetic. So I'll say it's probably an easier path to peace,
Yeah.
or more reliable maybe than the outward path, because in and going into the outward path, it also has advantages and disadvantages. I think one of the disadvantages, as I've seen, is that you can get lost in the roller coaster of sensations, emotions, etc., quite easily if it's not somehow balanced with this more expansive awareness.
That's right. I think that is one of the dangers. And when that happens, you start to feel like what you need to do is manipulate your experience of those sensations, perceptions, and the world and other people and yourself. And
Hmm.
that's definitely, I think, a, uh, a detour at
Hmm.
best.
And what do you see as the advantages then of the outward facing path?
Well, one of the advantages is that you can see that if you remove all the conditions you have for happiness, then the next step is discovering that joy can be found in the world. In other words, the beauty of the world and the love of other people and the creativity of people and the beauty of nature and the fun of engaging activities and the fun in using your gifts. The individual can be re-included and not separated. And you can enjoy the fun of using your gifts in enjoyable ways. And so it really is about, I mean, the inward facing path is of pure happiness and love that is your nature can color the outer experience of the world.
Hmm. Jeffrey Martin of the Finder's Course talks about this experience or method called pure conscious experience or unprovoked happiness. And I'm wondering if you would equate that with the outward facing path or if in some way they're slightly different.
Well, I don't equate those two terms in my mind that you used, but the pure conscious experience is like experiencing something like he uses examples, for instance, of videos of people blowing huge soap bubbles in the air and
Uh-huh.
watching these videos without using words to describe it. In other words, you're not putting symbols in your mind to experience the world. You're experiencing it directly, and that's direct experience. And I think that is swell. I mean, I think that's great. I'm all for it. But I do think that it involves direct, unfiltered by thought and analysis experience of wonderful things that you can look at. I think the other one, uncaused happiness, is for me, that's more related to the inward facing path, to discovering that happiness is already there. It's only covered up temporarily by thoughts about the past and the future. And when you quiet down all those thoughts about the past and the future and the internal desire to change your experience or to fix things, then that happiness that's already there reveals itself and reveals itself to be uncaused, meaning it's not related to outward experience. It's just the default state. So I see those two terms as different, but ultimately, when the two paths are followed, you realize they're one path.
Hmm. Well, I get to disagree with you, which always makes me
Oh,
excited.
goody.
We agree on so much. I see pure conscious experience and unprovoked happiness as the same thing as the outward path. And I'm going to read something that is from a description of unprovoked happiness or pure conscious experience as a tool, and our listeners might, use this as like the method for the outward path and see if you agree with that. It
Okay.
says, commit totally to the sense field, this rich and vibrant and colorful volume of human experience with thoughts and body and memory and sensual lusciousness. Really be with that all day long whenever you can remember. Be obsessive about this, but in a light-hearted, adventurous way rather than a drudgery sort of way. Drudgery won't help at all. Inspiration and anything you can do to be inspired helps. I listened to my favorite music on fantastic headphones, ate my favorite foods and relished them, really paid attention when watching my favorite movies and cool visuals, really enjoyed the feel of driving down the road with my hand on the wheel, my foot on the gas, and the wind in my rapidly vanishing hair. Really listened to myself when I played guitar. Really listened to people and looked at them when they talked. Really listened to the sound of my own voice when I spoke. Really felt just to be a feeling of myself in this body. Recommit again and again and again and again. Make it a way of life. It is your life, so you might as well be there for it. What do you think?
Well, I love that. I think that's absolutely wonderful. I could not find anything against it. I practice that in my life. I have one word for it, appreciation.
Hmm.
And I think that is so important. And this is also a great description of the outward facing path for people who just want to do that. So maybe there is certain value in beginning with the outward facing path. The only distinction that I would make is that it is still happiness caused by something. It is still happiness related to outward experience, whereas uncaused happiness for me is simply there already, no matter what is happening. In other words, even if the body has sad emotions coursing through it, happiness is there to experience. In other words, you could be happy when you're sad.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you allow that, then everything that you described is so much easier and vital to returning to the world and enjoying life.
Uh-huh. Louis C.K., my favorite comedian, has a thing you can watch on YouTube called Louis C.K. Cell Phones. And he talks about the beauty and joy of completely allowing sadness and how that can be one of a great happiness is to just really be there with it. And I get that. My beloved 14-year-old dog died about 7 weeks ago. And, I've always avoided grief because it's given me trouble and I'm afraid of it, or I've been afraid of it. But I've been taking moments to just meditate on the, the sadness or the beauty of missing that dog. And I could see that, you could do that really with anything. In the Tantra tradition, they you merge with sexual energy and devotion, and it's really the merging with the outward emotions or outward experience of sensual life that you lose yourself. And in that way, there's a similarity to the inward path where you're losing yourself in a different way. You're losing yourself by identifying with awareness. And ultimately, they both can bring you to a place of peace and presence. And that's where they kind of unite.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see that they would unite. And Rupert talks about how ultimately the experience is the same. The experience of looking inside at pure awareness and the experience of looking outside at the world is actually the same experience. It is the knowing of experience and the realization that the knowing of experience is not only what you are, but what everything is. And so, in the end, the two paths do combine.
I like the way you put that because I hadn't really seen it that way so much before. And I think that's true of a lot of religions or methods that there's different entry points, and as you go deeper into it, they merge. For example, like the intellectual aspects of Buddhism and the focus on awareness, if you go deeply into it, it leads to love, or the loving aspect of Christianity, if you go deeply into it, it leads to wisdom. And there's different entry points, but they all hit some kind of center at the core.
Yeah, beautifully put. It reminds me of the analogy of the spokes on the wheel. They all lead to the
Hmm.
center.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering what method you think of in terms of the outward path. Like when you think of it, the inward methods we've talked about a lot on this podcast, but we haven't talked much about quote methods for outward facing path. I'm wondering what arises for you.
Well, you can start with what's here now. You can start with what you're experiencing. You can start with the sounds in the room. You can start with the sensations of your body, the feeling of weight on the chair or floor, or a breeze on your skin, or light dancing on the leaves in a tree. And you can actually start with that, but you notice that they are not in separate awarenesses. There isn't an awareness for my body weight on the chair. There isn't an awareness for the sound of the birds or the air conditioner in the room. They are both in one awareness. So the idea is to ask, are they in two awarenesses or are they in one? And that turns your attention to awareness, and there's a sense of, I've loved this term, I didn't invent it, called one taste,
Hmm.
that all the outward experience is within awareness, and it is one thing. Just like in a dream, all the experiences in a dream are happening in the dream. They're all made of dream stuff. So that's another good way of looking at it. Imagine that you are in a dream, that you are awareness having a dream, that there's a body called Brian or Jonathan experiencing something in the world. Nothing in that dream takes place outside of the dream. It's all made of dream stuff. And the analogy then is that nothing that we experience in the world is other than awareness. That's the stuff out of which it's all made.
Mm. And, I'm thinking that another way of approaching the outward facing path is through the idea of having no resistance to anything. That there's always, either through our thought, which is a form of resistance to what is, or like body bracing in some way, there's always a very subtle form of resistance we're doing. And I remember a retreat I went with Adyashanti, he said, I'm going to give you the one step to enlightenment, no resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the negative way of putting it. You could say complete openness would be the other way of putting it. And that can almost be kind of like a mantra where you're opening your senses, you're kind of not focused on thought, which is a intermediary between us and experience. And I like your technique known as wordlessness.
I was just going to bring that one up. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, and it's one of my favorite techniques. So thank you for that, Brian. Um, well, it's your technique. So why don't you describe it?
Just asking yourself, what in my present experience can I know or experience without using words to describe it?
And what that does when you're doing it, if you're really doing it, is it forces you kind of into your sense field because that's the only thing that's wordless. And I often think of how I have a puppy now, and my puppy is a outward facing path Jedi master. And I was taking her for a walk today, and she's just like, if she could speak, it would be one word. Wow, wow, wow. She's totally in her senses, no resistance whatsoever. And, I could kind of like tune into her feeling of that. And that's doesn't involve any thought. It just involves really diving into one's experience.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I wish I could meet this puppy. It sounds like a lot of fun, but it also sounds like a handful.
She is a handful.
But what you describe, I think, is great, and it reminds me that the two elements of, and you could possibly call this outward facing path, that are important is the now. the power of now, the present moment.
That'd
But
be a great title for a book, by the way.
somebody should write that, the power of now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah. It'll
good.
bring about a whole new earth.
Go
Uh,
on.
and the body, noticing the body sensation. So when you notice the body, especially if you can notice them wordlessly, as we mentioned before,
Hmm.
it is now, right now. You the feelings in your body, the emotions that are coursing through your body, everything that you can experience about your body can only be experienced now. And that's why I think it's a wonderful tool.
Hmm. Yeah, I was listening to Hale Dwoskin yesterday do a talk of the Sedona method, and he kept saying something which really struck me anew, and that was experience is apparently happening to you. And what that meant to me was that there is no you, so it's only apparently happening to you. It's just happening. You know,
Hmm.
you're apparently doing something. No, you're not doing something. There is no you. You know, that's a concept in your head. If you look at your experience right now, there's just sensation, and there's probably thought too that's happening to impartial awareness, impersonal awareness.
Yep.
And that stance of the you is just another intermediary that is kind of subtly keeping you from direct experience.
Yes, well said. And I sometimes think of it this way. The you isn't really a noun. In your mind, it's a noun, but only in your
Right.
mind.
Right.
It is actually a verb. Experiencing is what you are,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
not
know,
what has experienced or who has experienced, but the the verb of experiencing is who you are without the mind's defining who you are.
we have so many nouns that really are verbs, like a cloud. There's no such thing as a cloud. It's moving water vapor. There's no such thing as a river. A river is a moving thing that's always changing. We just call it river. And the same thing for you and I. That there is no Brian. We make it into a noun, but it's Brianing. Or I like what Fred Davis says. There's Frednessing or something like that.
Hmm. Oh, I love that so much. I mean, to me, I mean that goes right there. That's,
Hmm.
that is so actionable, that is so experienceable, and it changes the idea. You can extend that to everything. There is nothing that actually exists, meaning
Permanently,
and yeah,
right.
permanently stands apart from anything else. Everything is change, everything is moving, all is movement. And I kind of think of it as the entire universe is simply one energy arising and falling in various temporary forms,
Uh-huh.
apparent forms.
My friend John Aston writes these beautiful songs, and I think this is from a Yogananda quote. He has a song that goes, "All things are impermanent, and knowing that brings the greatest joy in life," or something like that. And what he's saying is that if you are experiencing life as a total movement, there is joy inherent in that. When you try to make nouns out of verbs, including ourselves, then that's where energy gets stuck, thoughts take over, and you are kind of separate from everything.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'd like to hear that song.
Well, I will send it to you. Or
Great.
you on Apple Music, I think it's called Impermanence by John
Impermanence
Aston.
by John Aston. I'll look for it, and I'll see if I can include a link to it in the show
Hmm.
notes.
Hmm. Anything else before we do a meditation that comes to your mind?
Yeah, the only really two things are, I had mentioned some very short ways of helping you understand the inward and the outward facing path. One is, as I said already, nothing you can name or conceive of is awareness. Nothing you could name or conceive of is not awareness.
Hmm.
Another short way is meditating with your eyes closed and looking within at awareness, and meditating with your eyes open and looking at the world as awareness.
Well, I like that one. Yeah, that's a very simple approach.
Yeah. And then the very last thing is a famous quote from Nisargadatta Maharaj, one of the famous 20th century Indian sages. And this is how the quote goes. Wisdom tells me I am nothing. Love tells me I am everything. And between the two, my life flows.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great quote. And just to throw in another cliche we've used before, the two-wing analogy, that I think finding the balance between the inward and outward facing path, which it's not always a balance. Sometimes you might be focusing on one and sometimes on the other. But being that they both have potential downsides if you go too far in one direction, it's good to always have access to both wings, the inward and outward path.
Yeah, thanks so much for that reminder, because I was thinking of just calling this the other two wings. I mean, we've defined the two wings as the healthy development of your personal psychology and way of dealing with the world as one wing, and the development of your spiritual side and seeing yourself, seeing your true nature as the other wing. And we could the other two wings are the inward facing path and the outward facing path. And just as you describe, I think that one without the other doesn't fly.
And to take that analogy further, one wing of this podcast is you and I talking about things and interviewing people, and the other wing is our listeners being Patreon supporters, helping the podcast. Am I stretching this one a bit?
Jonathan, I love your segues to this. So please feel free.
It's part of my creativity is to find new and fascinating segues.
Yep.
But we do send our Patreon supporters a bunch of stuff. You can find out patreon.com/awareness explorers. We send bloopers and extra articles and extra interview segments, and we appreciate your support. With that segue, we'll segue into the next part, which is you leading us in a guided meditation.
Great. Thanks. I call this neti neti and reverse neti neti. And for those who are only listening to the meditation, neti neti is a Sanskrit term meaning not this, not this. Or as I like to put it, whatever you can conceive of is an appearance in you awareness, so it can't be you awareness. But once you've discovered what you're not, the second turnaround is paradoxically discovering that you are everything, that all is awareness, and you are that. So I like to think of this as neti neti and reverse neti neti. So let's walk through it. First, as always, close your eyes if it's safe to do so. Take a nice, easy, deep breath and relax. Ask yourself, what is this me I take myself to be? Whatever answer arises, see that it appears in awareness. So who or what is aware of it? For example, I am my body. Well, who or what notices this body? I am my thoughts. Who or what notices these thoughts? I am a person. In what clear field of awareness does this person appear? Keep going until you run out of answers, or until your answer cannot be described in words. Be that. Now, turn around and look out at the world as that, as pure, wordless awareness. What arises in awareness? Whatever answer appears, ask, does this appear apart from awareness? For example, the room I'm in. Does this appear apart from awareness? Or is it made of awareness? The chair or floor or bed I'm on. Does this appear apart from awareness? Or is it made of awareness? The sounds I hear, do these appear apart from awareness? Or are they made of awareness? The world outside, does this appear apart from awareness? Or is it made of awareness? Other people, do they appear apart from awareness? Or are they also made of awareness? Keep going until all that appears or could appear is seen as not separate from the one awareness that you are. Another approach is to ask yourself these 4 questions. 1. If there's only one thing going on, if the universe is simply energy rising and falling in various temporary appearances, then who could you possibly be but the entire universe experiencing itself? 2. If all is one energy rising and falling in various temporary forms, is it possible for all that you see and experience to be anything apart from you? 3. If the awareness that you are, like the sky or like a clear mirror, is unaffected by whatever appears within it and allows whatever arises to be exactly as it is, isn't that unconditional love? 4. And if at the same time all that arises is not separate from the unconditionally loving awareness that you are you not free to love the world unconditionally and to enjoy all of its myriad arisings with delight and relish? To sum up, look inside and see that the person slash body slash mind that you take yourself to be is not the real you, but the real you is that which knows all experience, pure awareness. Then look outside and see that nothing can appear outside of awareness, and thus all is you, awareness. There are no boundaries except in thought. Now, take another nice, easy, deep breath, and at your own pace, begin to open your eyes.
That was unique. I like how you ask questions that make my mind go blank.
Oh, good. That's great because the object of the questions is not to find an answer, it's to redirect your attention inward
Yeah.
or outward as the case may be when you're looking at all as awareness.
Yeah. Well, that was a fascinating conversation, and if people like this stuff, pass it on to your friends. Because I like how you say it in our outro, because knowing yourself as awareness, how do you say it, Brian?
Knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to those you love.
Ah, you say that so well.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for this gift of awareness, and we hope to see you next time on Awareness Explorers. Till then, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.